So Holly, take us back before real estate. What were you doing and how did you get into this adventure we call real estate?
I went down the wrong path for a while. So I got out of graduate school and I went out to San Francisco and I worked as an art and antiques appraiser. I thought that was awesome. It was a great job.
Art and antiques.
Yeah. There's so much natural disaster out there, right? Earthquakes, mudslides, fires, that people will carry insurance riders. Actually, David, this is a topic, right, from our past lives, right?
I get this.
They'll carry a lot of extra insurance riders for their valuables because there's a great chance of risk that things are going to burn down or fall down or be destroyed. So I got to go in like Danielle Steele's house and help appraise her collection of Fabergé. And, Steven Spielberg was a client, just like this kind of dream job. I was working for a psychopath. So that was the only downside to it. And I didn't like having a boss. So I didn't really know, I wasn't really thoroughly thinking this through. There was no like personality assessments being given to me to figure that out, but I wanted more control of my time. So I read Stephen Covey's book, and the thing that stuck out to me was, you begin with the end in mind. I'm like, oh, I'm just going down the wrong path. I'm going to go to graduate school because I'm going to become a professor and I'll have control of my time. And this is a great idea. I'm going back to graduate school. I have a master's. I'm going to go get a PhD.
I want to control my time. I'm going to go get a PhD.
I know. Right. Of course, I was also in San Francisco in 1994. I thought maybe I should go sell real estate. I could go back and slap myself in time. That'd be the big one. Like, hello, houses were still 300,000 there, which seemed unbelievable. Like a base house for 300,000 in San Francisco, worth now 3 million or more.
Right. So you were never on Antiques Roadshow.
No, but my friends are. Like I love graduate school, and I'm like, oh, I know that. Yeah, I can. That was kind of my. Well, maybe in the alternate universe, you would have seen me on Antiques Roadshow.
That's exactly where my mind went. Like as soon as you said Antiques Appraiser, I was just like, oh, PBS, Antiques Roadshow. Right. All right. So PhD, you enter into the program. Keep going.
So I'm getting close to like finishing my degree. I actually study women's ownership of property. God is speaking to me. I'm just not listening. I'm reading deeds, but they're from the 1700s. I'm spending a lot of time reading deeds. Finishing my work. And then I come to this realization that in order to teach in academia, I have to go wherever the job is. And again, this like, oh, I want to be in control of my life. In fact, I'm not going to teach. I don't want to go to South Dakota. I don't know where it is. I want to live in New England. It's really hard. So I realized, wow, I've been following a path a long ways and not gotten anywhere. I was finishing my dissertation, had kids, and my husband, who was a chef at the time, had a massive knee injury. And we were like, wow, you need to find a new career. And this was the early 2000s when everyone was becoming a real estate appraiser. He became one. I was like, wow, I should become one too. This is a good gig. I can plan it around the kids. I like real estate, I like houses.
Right.
And at that time, it was very easy to become an appraiser. There's probably 200 people in our class in Massachusetts. So I became a real estate appraiser, and I was one for 10 years. So we built a business. I appraised thousands of homes, literally, sometimes 20 a week.
Wow.
And, watched the market go spike, right? Was part of that spike. I can't say I was doing anything unethical, but I remember, being in houses and kind of like jumping up and down, like, I wonder if this house, I think the house is moving. I can't believe what it's valued at. We knew our business would go down. It went down 8% in the downturn. 80. Yeah. So by 2010, I was like, why do I even have a appraiser license? This is dumb. Like, we don't need 2 appraisers in the family. There's not enough work for one. I'm going to go into sales. What could go wrong? And I joined Keller Williams. And so I started there. I started in sales in the exact opposite market that we have now. I started in a buyer's market. So the good thing was you could work with buyers. They could see houses. They had time to think about them. They could negotiate. They could do inspections. I met with sellers and I'd see like, oh, you bought your house in 2006. I'm like, oh my God. Right. And that's really like that's the route into real estate. So
what were some of the things? Oh, you're going to say something, Joe?
Well, I wanted to go back before we get too much further along, Holly. Yeah. You mentioned Stephen Covey talking about beginning with the end in mind. And that's something I've heard several times. And I'm just curious to know what that means to you. And in retrospect, do you feel like you were thinking with the end in mind when you went into the appraisal business and then eventually into the real estate business? How did that play out in your life?
Yeah, I don't think I was thinking that clearly. I think I was thinking what I didn't like. I didn't like having a boss who could say, well, where are you? Call me. I didn't like having a boss. And I wasn't quite clear in that. My worldview was limited. I was very afraid of commission sales. My dad kind of came from a corporate life. He's older, like you have a job, you stay with the job. So I thought in more secure ways. So I was only thinking of what I didn't like. I wasn't envisioning the life I do want, which has actually taken me a long time. I feel very clear now. I know exactly, like I've mapped that out, like, this is what I want my life to be now. This is where I want to go. Is this taking me in that direction? Right. Before it was just like, I don't want to have a boss, or, I want to do this, or I don't want to be told where I have to live. It wasn't really
right
picture in my head. Right.
It was almost like, and I think this is an NLP concept, like a move away goal versus a move towards goal.
Right. Yeah. Right. Something you don't want. And that's oftentimes a good motivator for people to get them going and to start moving in a direction. And then as you begin down that journey, you start realizing what it is that you actually do want.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So I wanted to ask along the appraisal route and having that much experience in appraisal, what are some of the things that you learned and took from that business into your eventual sales career?
I really understood, appraisal is really about the quantitative, so it's pure the math. Like, how does the house compare? Are you finding houses the same size? What is that? And I didn't have as much, and I explain that to clients or other realtors. It's the qualitative side is when you're in sales. What is emotionally going to drive people? What will make those decisions? So having that very firm base in how houses are really priced, how appraisers are going to price them. I feel like that's the foundation, but then I can also understand the escalation when the buyer's like, oh my God, I love this kitchen. Most appraisers, like, it's a kitchen, they don't really, there's not as much understanding of really what makes that price shoot. So it gave me great. I know my geographic knowledge is ridiculously large. I know neighborhoods in the towns that other people have never been to because I did things across 2 counties. So I feel very comfortable when someone comes, I can move around and feel very good being in very different places other than where I've lived.
I love that you mentioned the qualitative and quantitative pieces. I think that's a good lesson for all of our listeners to kind of get in. It's almost like we have 2 different roles that we have to master when we get into real estate, right? The quantitative part you described as how do I price a home? How do I look at the data and interpret what it means and what that might indicate as far as what's coming in the future market. And then the qualitative part, how do I deal with people, right? How do I earn their trust? How do I help them through those difficult transactions, emotional transactions? I just kind of love the way that you, tied those 2 things together and
framed it really nicely.
It reminds me of like the art and the science, right? There's an art and a science to business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important because especially when we find ourselves in a market like this, to be able to bring both of those to the fiduciary relationship that you have with your buyer, for instance, and help them understand, we're going to escalate this up to this price, and this from the quantitative side is what that actually means for you in this situation. And I think some agents, especially agents that haven't experienced different market cycles, don't necessarily realize both sides of that coin.
Right. And Holly, you had a pretty good first year. I think you were the rookie of the year, right? Your first year in real estate.
My first full year. I started in April, so I got rookie of the year the following year. They kind of gave me a little, buffer year to get started. But I was a really slow start those first 8 months.
Talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah.
I think I was still very education based, which is why I could go crazy at KW because there's so many classes.
Right.
And I think I was feeling like I have to know way more, even though I already knew a lot about houses. I'm like, I have to know about sales, So I went to a lot of classes and, and then I'd lead generate. Like my first client was my neighbor. I literally, people say, what are your scripts? My first script was like calling my neighbors. Hi, guess what? I just got my real estate license. So my first client was my direct neighbor. She says, I just saw a house. I want to buy it. this is great. Let's go. So I think I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I just got more comfortable. I persevered through rejection. There was a ton of rejection, of people I knew, people who were my friends who would use someone else. I think that learning to roll, that was like the biggest lesson of the beginning time, to not get discouraged and, take knowledge and move forward, with that knowledge.
So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to the agent that's listening right now saying, I do need to learn a lot more before I feel comfortable starting to lead generate? What advice would you give them?
Still totally lead generate. Yeah. I mean, I think really always be pushing yourself in those directions, but also pushing yourself in a way that you feel comfortable. If someone had told me in the beginning, hey, we're going to lock you in a room and we're going to give you a phone book and you've got to call 500 people, I'd be like, I'm going to go get a different job. Just knowing myself, right? But I said, you've got to make contacts. It doesn't matter how you get from A to B. That was easier for me, because then I would just engage people at school drop off. And I would say things like, hey, I'm challenging myself to talk to 20 people about real estate today. And I would use even a bold script, who do you know anybody who wants to buy, sell, or invest? I'm just asking people that, right? And I'd kind of make it friendly and they'd say, and I'd get good responses. And other times people look at me weird. But when I pushed myself that all I have to do is talk to people, I don't have to do something I completely hate. I did better, not going too far out of my comfort zone, but I still had to do the activity. I just had to do more of it because I wasn't calling the FSBOs and the expireds. I wasn't, I was going a longer route, more of a nurture build up route, and it just took longer.
Well, yeah. And I like how you put that as well. You spent less time focusing on the method and more time understanding I need to go from A to B. And the pathway of getting there is contacts. And so it doesn't really matter how I get there. I just got to contact people and I will get to point B.
Yeah.
Eventually, it may be a longer path or a shorter path, but it doesn't matter. You just get to A to B.
Yeah. Yep.
You briefly mentioned sort of like fear and rejection, and I'm just wondering what advice you would give to a salesperson around that. I mean, anybody in sales knows that you're going to experience a lot of rejection. I mean, in real estate, I tell people all the time, there's only on average about 7% of the population that has any real estate need at any point in the next 12 months. So that means 93% of the time you are going to get a no. How do you overcome that, combat that, and still go into sales with sort of that positive, energetic spirit?
Mm-hmm. I feel that I can be a resource to people. At this point, let's frame it that way. Right now, I'm like, I can help them with anything, a question they might have, or they just want to talk about it, or I can geek out on it. In the early days, I knew that it was I had that sense it was going to be a longer play. I don't know why I wasn't actually, I don't know if this is helpful or not. Like I wasn't watching my numbers, right? I wasn't like, wow, I have a desk here at the office, so I don't get distracted by my kids and I'm making no money. I was investing money and making no money for months, right? I had costs and I wasn't too like hung up like, well, I should quit. I've lost hundreds of dollars or something. I really was seeing that longer picture and I was looking at people and I knew I had to persevere. I work in Maine. It's a very small place. So I knew I couldn't show being upset or rejected. So I learned very much, like when I would go and I'd even have the appointment and they'd call me like, oh, well, we went to work and our coworker, blah, 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 so we're going with someone else. I'd be like, oh, that's great. They're a great agent, and I got really good at those scripts, right?
Right.
Asking for the business and then making people feel okay. They rejected me. That was the thing too. So they could go away and I'd be like, hey, next time. And there are people that came back to me, like the next year they said, well, I didn't help you let you sell my house. But you've been working so hard. Why don't you help me buy a condo? So I was never burning bridges. I was really working very intentionally to just keep on moving. Like it'll come back around, that's okay. And then I might go home and cry or be sad in my car.
Yeah, we've all been there. So, okay. So you have a very successful first full year, 2011. Yep. And then you start at some point going down this like team building path. Talk to us about what went into that decision and what did those first few years look like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that I definitely got busy and was building a business, but I wasn't building it systematically. And I was somebody who was just doing every aspect, maybe except I made my David, my husband. So he was my admin, which is hysterical, right? Because he was a little more tech savvy, not that he was administratively savvy. But I got exposed to bigger things. I would travel to conferences early on, and not know what I was doing. Like the first big conference I went to was probably 2011. And I went to sessions on on everything. I was like, oh, I'm going to learn about foreclosures and REO and luxury and, all over. But I was also at that time encountering these big producers. I was like, wow, there's this opportunity even beyond the big pond of Maine, but like ocean of what could be possible in real estate. And so I saw that I was not going to do that solo. I wasn't going to get to that by myself.
So now as you begin to be sort of exposed to this bigger possibility, walk us through sort of that initial process of beginning to build your team and create leverage and what that process looked like and felt like for you.
It was a total mess, honestly. I wasn't systematic. I wasn't doing things now like where I'll advise agents like create your not to do list. I was kind of just hacking my way. I wasn't reading as much of the red book as I could have because it lays it all out. Every time I go back, I'm like, oh, look, here's all that. How I could do that. So I think that it was, it took longer that way because I was, just goofing around on it, right? And cycling through people. And the biggest thing I did not get focused enough early on was how to hire and how to lead administrative staff. So I went through a lot of people, I was hiring out of convenience, like, oh, you're my friend, you need a job, you like houses, here's a great idea, right? Not setting expectations. So there's just a lot of that, those false starts, like here's this or here's that. And it would have been much better if I really even modeled after someone else, just was like, and was checklisting it my way through. So
talk to us about specifically what you just mentioned there, hiring the administrative operations. There's this shift that happens in your mind where, okay, I can't hire out of convenience anymore. What changed in your process on that front to start identifying actual real operational talent? Because that really becomes, in my understanding, one of the primary value drivers of your new platform vision of the team. And we'll get there, but take us into the hiring process and that switch that flipped for you.
It was systematically following the process. So I follow career visioning process, but I will follow it to the T. I will tell the person, I'm going to read these things exactly to you, right? That, when I'm verifying and meeting, I'm not skipping the steps. And before I was like, oh, this seems great. Or so-and-so, they used to work for so-and-so. That seems great. So I was really just emotionally or, not doing the background checks, not doing things. And when I realized I really need to zero in to find if this person is what I think they are and not me magically telling myself stories, who are they personality type? And I'd say one of the hires I made that was really great that way, that's a more recent hire. My team looked at me like, are you crazy? And she was a Head Start teacher, right? So she wasn't in real estate, right? But I always joke you work with toddlers. This is awesome. You're going to do really well with realtors.
Perfect.
There's a lot of correlation here.
Seamless, right? But she worked in Head Start. She worked for in a governmental program. She just had all these checks and balances and procedures and calmness and and I was like, these are all those things. It didn't matter if somebody was an agent that went on a side gig, right? That's how sometimes we can feel or my sister wants to do this, so she's going to be my admin. It'll be great. It was really getting into the behavioral traits and whether they were a match for the position and a fit with me too.
Yeah, definitely. So take us, I mentioned kind of let the cat out of the bag. I mean, you have used this word before, platform. I don't know if that's how you describe your team now, but as you start to get more systematic about growing the team, you start thinking in a new way. And it starts to create what I think Abode has become and continues to evolve into. So talk to me about that a little bit. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I had more of a traditional team model with a buyer agent before. And this was years ago, feels like it wasn't that long ago, but where everyone was having teams with completely specialized people and buyer's agents, listing agents, and I just didn't think that was the best use of people. So it's funny enough, guys, I was listening to a podcast and I was listening to Mike Zinicola out in Ohio on a podcast. And that's how I'd walk. I'd hear other ideas when I wasn't at conferences. And he has this team and people are working with buyers and sellers. And his rationale is that, someone may know this person, they're helping sell the house. Why wouldn't they want to work with them as the buyer? Why would they just want to help them buy and not sell? They have the relationship. And it just clicked for me. So I saw him at a conference. I knew he was going to a conference. My husband, I took him out for dinner. I said, I want to follow your model. So I actually found a model. I said, teach me your model. I love it. And I want to do it in Maine. And he broke it apart for me and the financials and everything else. So what I came to realize is that there's this gap of people that don't want to have a team and don't want to be alone, right? And they want something that is in the middle there. They want to stay focused on their clients. They want to do business. They want to have all the resources of a team and the access and the bells and whistles and the collateral materials and the training and the camaraderie, but they don't want to be the one writing the check to the administrators, making the decisions, dealing with all the other stuff that can come with owning the business. They just want to go sell. And so when I got that clarity, which is refined a lot, it's like, there's a group of people here that's not being served. And I would love to serve them. I would love to create that, kind of boutique firm within a larger firm for them and help them with their businesses.
I just want to point something out real quick. David, as you know, I listen to a lot of Tony Robbins, and Holly, he talks about the 3 principles of mastery. And just in this brief conversation already, I've heard you describe how you've lived the 3 principles of mastery. Let me just give a quick outline. Number 1, immersion. You talked about how when you were new, you went to every conference you could go to, and you just put yourself in the room, in the environment with the right people that you wanted to learn from and grow with. And then the repetition, doing it over and over and over again. And the one I thought of, honestly, was not that we're necessarily promoting this, but you're churning through administrators. There's some repetition there in the hiring process. And then, of course, once you learned a better system, you've gone through that process several times. And then the last one is modeling, which was really like the icing on the cake for me when you mentioned, listening to Mike, but then reaching out to him and like, hey, you're doing what I want. Teach me the way you're doing it. And those are just 3 fundamental principles I think all of our listeners should take a look at and say, how am I immersing myself with the right people, repeating the same activities over and over and over again, and modeling the behavior of the successful people that I want to emulate?
Yeah.
Really good. So Mike tears it all apart. He starts to, he says, go do this in Maine. What happens next? I mean, what are some of the successes that you had? And I imagine there's some failures that happen with that too.
Yeah. So I came back and I was like, guess what? This is what I'm doing. And what was interesting, and I'm still in business with some of them, is I had 3 very successful agents who I was not expecting would be my target audience. I'll join that team. I'll come back. They all have these businesses of their own. I was like, what? I was expecting a different agent at a different level, but people who really had built up businesses but had not mastered leverage and were sick of dealing with leverage themselves, of having, either no help or part-time help. So that gave it a great boost out the door, right? That was kind of like, wow, it was a great launch. And then it attracted other people as well, but I think there was still the messy of like finding that groove and the rhythm and who's the avatar for this platform, who does it serve the best? And we launched very heavily, so I went from, sales on my own with a buyer agent of 15 million, and we went to 45 million, so it was a big jump, and then jump again up to 60 million. So it was kind of
catastrophic. That too.
You know what I mean? So that leap and still just figuring things out as you're kind of like the rocket ship's taking off, right? You're like, whoa, okay, here we go.
So what are some of those things that you take off, like in your team model? If someone's out there thinking about, this sounds kind of intriguing to me, and right now I'm running a team, or I'm thinking about a team of specialists, and I want to move more towards this generalist idea where I fill a specific value gap and I just master that one value gap. I mean, where do they start?
They really have to start and understand financials, right? Model it out of what the financials look like, because the other thing that is very important distinction between me and other teams and what we do, because I have a large group of agents, they create their own leads. I support their lead generation. I do not hand them leads. Right? So it allows me to have a different split level with them, and for them to, but they're more in charge of that lead generation, right? So I'm here to fulfill those other tasks. I'm here to deliver coaching, training, a community, in-house photography, marketing, social media, transaction, everything that other than them going and finding those leads, finding those clients and serving them and negotiating contracts. That's that clarity. Like if you want to do that, we're that platform for you to go build your business as big as you want. And also if you're doing it really as a side gig, it's here too, right? People who just want to, they're doing something else or have focused on their kids and they want to have a slower pace. So that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I like that you start there with actually modeling the financials out, because I mean, one thing that I've seen so much is that specifically when someone jumps into team building, one, they're not confident in their own value. And so they end up giving away the farm because they just don't feel like they have the value to justify their own splits. And then they get 3 years into the business and they're like, wow, I can't retain any of my operational and administrative talent because I can't pay it because I don't have a margin that supports it, right? And so starting with the financials is, in a sense, beginning with the end in mind and being able to make sure that this model's sustainable. So, okay, so where's the team now then, and where do you see it going in the future, Holly?
Well, these are weird times in real estate. It's hard to predict, like, I wonder what's going to happen next, or, where are we going to be in the fall? So we have 18 agents right now. We're growing, but we're intentionally growing more with agents who have done some production. So I think that's another issue for people who have teams. Someone who's brand new out of real estate school, they don't necessarily understand the full value proposition. I think, there's something to be said for going out there and hacking your way through some things and seeing what it's like, and being in a coaching program or things, and then deciding if that's really the fit for you. So I think that I've gotten great clarity. It's very clear to me on what we do, what we don't do, but also always looking for ways to take more off their plate. I met today with my director of operations. It's like, here's another strategy of something we can create a Google form for, and the VA can run it, and the agents don't have to deal with this now. They have to oversee it, but they don't, they have to review it, but they don't have to deal with it. So I'm always thinking that way of what to deliver, and then to grow, not to the size. My people I model off of have a tremendously huge business, like hundreds of 150 agents, they're really, they're scaling out. So I have a lot of clarity too on like the size that I like and where I want to be, and did expansion and then retracted from that too, into another state. Very, growth is very intentional now instead of just like frantic,
Definitely.
Ink spot, like ink explosion.
So you've seen multiple market cycles. You've seen this business from various different aspects. We were talking a little bit off the air about something that I don't want to call it a regret, because everything that happens to us happens to a reason, and it brings us to where we are now. But you've also, in addition to growing the team, really started to be more intentional around growing your wealth through ownership of real estate as well. And that started for you after, if I'm getting my math right, probably about a decade in this business. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about, how you started thinking that way and getting more intentional about that.
I didn't recover from a mistake as quickly as I could have. So in like 2000, I was part of the buying spree of the mid 2000s. We bought a 20 unit apartment building about 2 hours from here in a seller finance deal. It's kind of all crazy, right? Like, oh my God, this could even happen for like $200,000. All of it is like, and it was a disaster, and we just basically gave it away. We had a bad manager, we had bad tenants. And it actually scared me so much about owning real estate, so that I didn't come back to it for 15 years. I was like, I'm going to build money a different way. I don't want to ever deal with that again. That was terrible. I saw the downturn. And then, so it took a long time for me to hear. And then I took a class, Millionaire Real Estate Investor, with Gene Rivers, who I'd take any class he teaches. He teaches how to be an accountant.
Me too. Yep.
And he finally, it's like, I don't know what the scales lifted or my ears open. I was like, oh, I can do this. And he spoke about, he and his wife own 30 single families, free and clear. And that is the family nest egg. And that's in a trust for his family. And he buys in Florida, and he rattled off his criteria. And I have to almost do it in like a Tallahassee accent. I think that's what he had. Rebecca and I buy a single family, 3-bedroom house, level lot, no big trees, you know, like, and the stuff.
You do that well for the record.
Yeah, right? Rebecca and I went, I know that. I know that product. And I left that class and I came home to my husband and said, we're going to buy a property every quarter next year. At that time, we only owned the house we lived in. I said, we're going to buy one a quarter. And he's like, what? I was like, here we go. Right. And we did. So, I mean, it was crazy. We put that pressure on ourselves. It was a good year in real estate. We were making money. He was an appraisal business. So we were always focused. We've got to get that next 20% down. Like we were just churning it. Like, I mean, the drive was wild of seeing the properties and then, you know, and it was incredible. It was great. But, you know, what I say to people, I did that at 55. You know, it's never too late, right? To put the fire on. I just had to put the fire, you know, like torch it. Because I can look back, I'm like, wow, what if I had, you know, we can always go back to time. What if I had started earlier? What if even in 2010, what if I'd bought houses when you could buy them for 100,000? But instead of getting hung up on that, I was like, what does this mean for the future? I modeled it forward. What if I buy these houses now? You know, what will this income be created in the future? And it brought so much clarity to my life. I live in a house that is indistinguishable from my rentals. So, you know, I don't live in a fancy house, but I'm very intentional. That was part of the plan too. I said, we're just going to stay here. This will become one of our rentals. You know, if I showed you pictures of them all, you'd be like, which one do you live in? You can't tell, you know. Kids are disappointed. They'd like us to have a much nicer house. but getting that focus and then that focus of going forward, like, and taking action that is so focused, so enveloping, right? They're like, wow, we've got to come up with this money. We've got to find the property. We've got to, you know, line up the lending. It was really powerful.
Holly, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you were listening to Gene Rivers and you said, hey, I know that product. Right? I am a professional real estate person that's been in the business for a long time. I sell houses every week. So I understand the intricacies of this process and how it appreciates over time and what debt pay down and equity and tax advantages mean. And I think, you know, I'm so passionate about this topic because I think there's so many professionals out there who are choosing not to build wealth in real estate. And we have the access, we have the knowledge and the resources. What advice do you give to real estate agents out there that are in real estate and maybe like you are a little, I don't want to say intimidated, but maybe off put or not sure about their desire to invest in real estate? How has it changed your life?
Changed my life dramatically. You know, the net worth, it's gone up so much. And I would say there's so many ways you could just like talk yourself out of it or negatively, but you think, you know, what you were just saying, it's about all the advantages that we already have because we know the product so well, right? We also know how to create an offer. So the first property we went under contract with last year, the list agent actually met us there at the property. And I said, okay, other than price, what do they want? You know, I'm thinking like, well, how can I help? And she said, they're building a house. I said, oh, so they might want to rent back. She's like, yeah, they've just started. So letters were still allowed. It wasn't a letter like, you know, I wrote her a letter and I said it was mostly the wife who responded. It was a multiple offer. And I said, here's the great news, right? Your house is beautiful. You have boys. It doesn't smell like shoes. My house stinks. You know, so it's just a totally different letter. Like, you've taken such good care of it. I said, my husband and I want to invest in real estate. So we'd be happy to rent your house back to you at a term that you would like for as long as you want while you're building your house. So she read my letter with the other letters. That was a letter made her cry because she didn't want to take her kids out of school. Her son wanted to stay there and graduate, right? She didn't want the stress of like, what if they couldn't find another house in that same school district? So we got that, right? So that's why I say to people, like, we know how to like find the path, right? Find the creative solution, even when the market's crazy and there's multiple offers. You know, I was like, this is great. I want to buy a rental property and you want to rent your house, right? So how wonderful. And let's, you know, and that's how it came together.
You're creating solutions, and we have that ability every single day. I mean, you're talking about yourself too, Holly, like you're Betty White, like you're 95 years old, you're 55, but let's go along with it. Okay. And I love the change in perspective, the reframe to rather than thinking, oh man, what if I had bought in San Francisco in, whatever, 2000. And instead now you're playing it forward. What does this look like? You start thinking in the world of possibility, and then new paths open up, and then you take action. You basically create that smallest target, that smallest domino, which is the 20%. I just got to get to the next 20% down, next 20% down, next 20% down. And you go out there and you accomplish it. I love that. Yeah, I want you to talk specifically to other people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Who are still in real estate, because we all have those agents in our brokerages, and they look us in the eye and they say, well, I'm just going to show houses till I die. And I always look back and I'm like, that's BS. Like, no, you're not. You don't want to. You've just convinced yourself. What do you say specifically to that person who thinks it's too late to do what you're doing right now?
Mm-hmm. I love the metaphor of like the runway, where you are in the runway. People can feel like, oh, my runway is a lot shorter. I'm like a lot further down. I'm like, that means you just make different choices, right? So this is something I'm sure that every finance book I've read would say this is a dumb idea, but I'll just put it out there. One of the things I played with, I said, well, what if we buy these properties? Our income is very high. We don't have big housing expenses because we live in a house way below what we could afford. We make money. I took the houses and I started playing around with Dave Ramsey's calculator of paying off a mortgage faster. And we're making enough money. What if I just pitch, like we have cash flow from the property? What if I just pitch that back into that one property and I add something to it? I pay off a mortgage in 7 years. In 7 years from now, I could have a portfolio. People could even have just a couple properties. They're just cash flowing that much more, right? That might not make the most financial sense. I like single families because I didn't want to deal with multis, but it's like, looking at that generation, like then I don't have to show property. What can I do to get to that place? And I think, realtors, we see so much real estate. We know how to create deals. We know how to put things together. Like, what is that longer term thing that we're doing, that we're turning it around to create that passive income. So I think that's, that play at different strategies of what you want to do. And then know that there's ways, whatever your comfort level, David, I know you like to invest in multis, right? I don't like multis. So, if my next play, I want to have a bigger multi that someone can manage, right? But it's like there's a place for all of us in some form of investment in real estate.
Right. Be creative.
Yeah.
So I love the analogy of a runway, and I'm thinking through my head, like I was gonna summarize that, and then I remembered that I'm sitting right next to someone who ran flight traffic directing,
air traffic control,
and I'm like, I'm not gonna actually try and repackage this any further because I'm gonna get something wrong and he's gonna smack me.
No, it's a perfect analogy though. I think the runway is a great analogy as far as looking at what do I want to accomplish in my life. And how much time do I want to give to that particular project? And then it makes me think about, as you were talking, Holly, the legacy that you can leave for your family, right? It's this not even, and I'm not speaking for you, I imagine it's not just about the wealth you can create for yourself in this life, but what that means for the generations to come as well. And if nothing else, that's an inspiring thought.
Yeah. No, I think it's exactly, when you really start and you hear people who've done that. And that's when you realize, that's why I tell people take the classes, because it's not just even always the class content. It's that brilliant instructor who has a little sidebar and says, hey, this is what I did, right? This is,
right.
Or this is what Zach and I did.
Joe and I can attest. We were all in the same market center together for a while, and you're constantly traveling to all the events and learning from all the people, and you always have like the notepad and the earbud in, listening even between. So like what you're saying is like not that any of our guests make stuff up, but like Holly models it. Holly lives this. And if you see her walking around at any of the conferences out there, like you're going to see this. And so go out there and be learning based and approach the speakers, approach the people and ask them hard questions and get in with them and say, I want to model you. Just like if you were racing and you were going to draft someone who is running the time you want to run, like get on their shoulder and figure out how you can bring them value such that you can go recreate and probably go even further and do better than they have done.
Yep. And so, I think if I can add one last plug for people in real estate, I believe so strongly in the power of coaching. I have a coach who coaches me now on how to lead a team, but how to build wealth. I just hired another coach. So I have two coaches, right? Because I like her model and her model of leverage, extension leverage. Like, why not go learn, right? In the beginning, you can learn just by taking somebody out for a nice dinner. That's how Mike Zinicola sat down with me. He's like, take me out for a steak dinner and I talk about myself for 3 hours. This is great. Like, he loved it. That was super fun.
When are people going to start asking us that?
Right. It's coming, David.
Yeah, but sometimes you pay people to be in your world, and that's great, right? Why not go and have that accountability, but also that knowledge and that, learn where they are and how they got there that fast,
well, and
or slow.
Just to connect some dots for people, you mentioned that you're living in a house far below what you could afford, and yet you have two coaches. And so that's one of those examples of like, I can have these superficial objects, or I can invest in myself because of all of the good that I can create with that new information.
Yeah. What's going to make your curve go that much quicker? How much faster can you get to that hockey stick acceleration in your life and go where you want to go? And so that's why I totally believe that. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to tell you, turn it back to the runway real quick, because I feel like we're like, so a commercial jetliner takes far more runway to take off than like an F-16 fighter pilot taking off from a boat, right?
For sure, yep.
Yeah, like, okay. And so like what you just said, there's certain things that you can invest in that are going to accelerate the path such that you hit altitude quicker, right? Yeah. So there we go. How'd I do?
That was fantastic. That was wonderful. That was beautiful, David. I could see it as you were describing it.
I almost felt like Joe with you now. I want to transition as Holly into the last segment of our show, which is 3, 2, 1 action. It's the same 3 questions we ask every guest. You ready for this?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Question number 1, Holly. Who is the one person that has had the biggest impact on your business and why?
That would be my coach. Wendy Papasan has had the biggest impact on my business. I auditioned to be coached or interviewed to be coached by her. I'd watched her career, and she just has held me accountable. She's called me out. She's encouraged me. She's shared her journey, and that constant in my life, that's what makes me do my P&L every week, right? That push. I wouldn't do it.
Love it. Love it. And you guys, listeners, you can go back all the way to the beginning of All In to like episode, it's probably 8, 9, or 10 with the Empire Builders. Wendy tells part of her story on that. So definitely we'll link that up in the show notes. Question number 2, what book has been most influential on your business and why?
I am obsessed with the book, The Psychology of Money. I feel like that book, I love that book. I'm like a groupie for Morgan Housel now. And I think it's because it's that understanding of where people's motivations are. And I think that, he just says like where, what you grew up in is how you perceive things. It made me just realize like everybody's approaching things differently. My dad, who can remember interest rates at 17%, is going to look at buying houses a certain way. Someone who's never seen inflation is going to have a totally different perspective, right? How we think about wealth and money. And that to me is what the real estate journey is, right? It's usually people's largest investment, and our individual perspective we bring to that is the most powerful.
I love that. Start with self-awareness of how you think about money and approach the conversation. That's perfect.
Well, we talked about, being in your 50s, 60s, 70s and thinking about the financial picture. I mean, on the flip side, I talk to a lot of 20 and 30-year-old agents who just get so arrogant about like the money that they are creating. And it's like, it's great. And have a little bit of humility around like where you are, recognizing that you weren't even a teenager in the last downturn. Like you've only known a bull run. So just wear your success with some humility, right? And so I think that's just really important when it comes to the psychology of money.
Yeah.
All right, Holly, question number 3. As you know, this is the All In podcast where we encourage our listeners to take what they've heard here today and go put it into action. So what's the one thing everybody can go do today to begin building wealth for themselves?
I can go buy a piece of real estate. I mean, really, like that's the thing, like commit to it, commit to what it looks like and just model it out. I think that's that. Buy for yourself, or look at everything as an opportunity to buy, and how could you do it? You don't have to fulfill it. I got kind of wrapped up in this $1 million condo I wanted to buy in another state, and I decided not to do it for a lot of reasons. But then I thought, well, how could I do it? Well, I'm like, maybe it's an off-market thing. Maybe he just seller financing and I could balloon payment, right? Like run the scenarios, run the things in your head, like visualize what you could do. Go on that listing appointment. Would I buy this house? Would I make an offer? What would it take for me to make an offer? Like look at all those scenarios of how you could do something.
Yeah, think in the world of possibilities. Absolutely love it. Our listeners are going to want to connect with you, find out more. They're going to want to come to Maine, get a lobster roll. So where, Holly, can our listeners connect with you or find more of your content?
You can, I'm happy to have people email me, and all my contact info shows on our team website. It's abode, like my humble abode, abodeteam.com.
abodeteam.com. Awesome. We'll link it up in the show notes. Listeners, this has been another great interview with Holly. Holly, thank you for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I think we'll probably both be out in Maine at some point this year. So we'll be seeing you at some point. Listeners, this has been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.